Primates. Life in the canopy. Look at your hand. Put down whatever you're holding and look at your hand. Turn it over. Spread the fingers. Bring your thumb across to touch the tip of each finger in turn, index, middle, ring, little, and notice how easily it happens, how you never had to learn it, how the pads meet cleanly every time. Now look at the fingertips themselves. Not claws. Nails, flat plates of keratin sitting behind a soft, ridged, fleshy pad, doing nothing but backing it up. And that pad is one of the most densely wired patches of skin on your entire body. You can feel a single grain of sand on it. You can read raised dots with it. This hand has done extraordinary things. It has chipped flint. It has thrown spears. It has threaded needles, played violins, performed surgery, and written every word of every book ever written. And it was not designed for any of that. It is a tool for picking small food off the ends of thin branches. That is what it evolved to do. That is the entire reason it exists. Somewhere in the warm forests of the Eocene, a small nocturnal animal was reaching out along a swaying twig, too slender to walk on, too flimsy to bear its weight, toward an insect or berry. And it needed to hold on with one hand while it grabbed with the other, and it needed to know exactly how far away things were, and it needed to feel what it was touching. Everything you are about to read follows from that. The forward-facing eyes, the color vision, the long childhood, the enormous social brain, the shoulder that lets you throw. All of it was assembled in the trees by animals that had no idea what any of it would be used for, and no need for it to be used for anything except staying alive in a canopy. By the end of this chapter, the equipment will all be in place. What will be missing is a reason to come down. Why not a squirrel? The classic explanation for the primate body is the simplest one. Trees. It's called the arboreal hypothesis, and it goes like this. If you live in a three-dimensional lattice of branches, where a misjudged reach means a fatal fall, then you need hands that grip, eyes that judge distance, and a brain to coordinate the two. Primate anatomy is what you get when an animal has to survive in the canopy. It's a good story. It has one very large problem. Squirrels. A squirrel is an absolutely superb arborealist. It runs along branches at speed, leaps between trees, hangs upside down from a bird feeder, and spirals up a trunk faster than your eye can follow. If life in trees demanded the primate body plan, the squirrel should have it. It doesn't. Not a beat of it. A squirrel has claws, not nails. Its eyes are on the sides of its head, not the front. It has no grasping hands at all. It presses its body against the bark and hooks in with sharp curved claws, the way a mountaineer hooks into ice. So being in a tree is not enough. The trees alone did not build you. The insight came from asking a different question. What other animals have forward-facing eyes? Cats, owls, hawks, eagles, not climbers, killers. Eyes at the front of the skull do exactly one thing supremely well. They let you fix your gaze on a target and know exactly how far away it is, because both eyes see the same thing from slightly different angles. And the brain can compute the difference. Eyes on the sides of the head give you a wide field of view, which is what a prey animal wants, because prey animals need to see what's sneaking up behind them. Eyes on the front give you depth, which is what a predator wants, because a predator needs to know precisely where to strike. Forward-facing eyes are aiming devices. So in the 1970s, the anthropologist Matt Cartmill proposed the visual predation hypothesis. The primate body plan is not fundamentally about climbing. It's about catching insects at close range and the fine terminal branches in the dark. The grasping hands are for seizing prey. The converged eyes are for aiming the seizure. And there's a third idea, which arrives from the plants. Look at the timing. Primates radiate in the Paleocene and Eocene, precisely when flowering plants are exploding across the world, producing fruits and flowers and nectar, and attracting the insects that come to eat them. And where is all of it? Not on the trunk, not on the sturdy inner limbs, out on the thin ends, where the twigs are too slender to stand on, where anything heavier than a small animal will snap the branch and fall. Fruit, flowers, nectar, and the insects that visit them. All of it concentrated in the one part of the tree where you need to grip rather than stand and reach rather than run. The modern synthesis takes all three. The first primates were most likely small, nocturnal, terminal branch foragers, working the swaying periphery of the canopy at night, taking both insects and plant food from twigs that would not bear their weight. And that niche demands three things at once: the grip of a climber to hold on to something that's swaying, the aim of a predator to strike at something small and fast, the touch of a forager to find and manipulate something small in the dark. It's the combination that's decisive. And it explains the squirrel perfectly: a squirrel is a trunk and branch runner, not a terminal branch manipulator. It's doing a different job. It never needed our solutions, so it never found them. What makes a primate? There is no single feature that defines a primate. There is a package, a set of traits that individually turn up here and there across the mammals, but which co-occur, altogether, only in us. Hands that grasp. The opposable thumb, rotating at a saddle-shaped joint at its base, so it can swing across and face the other fingers. Not merely alongside them, facing them. And in every primate except us, the big toe is opposable too. A chimpanzee has, in the most literal sense, 4 hands. A baby chimp can hang from its mother by all 4 of them. Nails, not claws. This is a genuinely strange trade, and it's worth understanding what was given up. A claw grips by piercing or hooking. It's a superb tool for a squirrel going up bark or a cat going up a tree trunk. But a claw is useless for gripping a slender branch because a slender branch doesn't get hooked. It gets encircled. You have to wrap your fingers around it and squeeze. And to squeeze, you need a soft, fleshy, conforming surface, a pad, that can mold itself around the shape of what it holds. So the primates ditched the claws and grew nails. Flat plates whose only job is to sit behind the pad and give it something to press against. And having done that, they got something no clawed animal has ever had. A fingertip that is a gripping surface and a sense organ at the same time. Run your finger over the edge of this page. That flood of information, texture, edge, temperature, pressure, the tiny catch of the paper's grain, arrives because our ancestors gave up the ability to hook into bark. Eyes at the front. The eye sockets rotate forward, so the 2 visual fields overlap heavily. Each eye sees the same scene from a slightly different angle, and the brain compares them, binocular disparity, and computes distance. This is stereopsis, and you can demonstrate it in 3 seconds. Hold a finger up at arm's length. Close one eye, then the other, then the first again. Watch it jump. That jump is the raw material. Your brain converts the size of the jump into how far away the finger is. Now close one eye and try to touch 2 fingertips together in midair. Notice how much harder it suddenly is. For an animal leaping between branches or striking at a moth in the dark, that is not a party trick. That is the difference between eating and starving, and between landing and falling. And primates protect the system obsessively. They grow a bar of bone, the postorbital bar, around the outer edge of the eye socket, and in monkeys and apes, a complete bony wall behind it. What's it shielding the eye from? The chewing muscle, which sits right there and bulges every time the animal bites. Think about what that implies. This lineage built a wall of bone inside its own head to stop its eyeballs being jostled while it ate. That is how much the eyes mattered. And the nose, in return, was allowed to die. Chapter 10 gave you a mammal whose whole world was smell and hearing, a nocturnal creature building a picture of the dark from chemicals and sound. Primates threw a great deal of that away. The snout shortened and flattened. The olfactory equipment shrank. And in the genome, you can read the wreckage directly. Monkeys and apes carry hundreds of olfactory receptor genes that have been broken by mutation and abandoned, pseudogenes, dead letters, the rusting hulks of receptors that no longer work because nothing bothered to maintain them. Your dog lives in a universe of smell you cannot begin to imagine. It isn't that dogs are unusually gifted. It's that you are the strange one. Your ancestors traded the ancestral mammalian nose for a pair of eyes, and it was a bargain they never went back on. A big brain. Larger than a mammal of that body size has any business having with the visual cortex expanded to handle all that stereoscopic input. And, in the later lineages, the frontal and association cortex expanded for reasons we'll come to in a moment. And, oddly, a body that never specialized. Here's something curious. Look at what the other mammal orders did with the limb they inherited. Horses reduced their digits to 1, fused and hardened into a hoof. Whales sealed theirs inside a flipper. Bats stretched theirs into wings. Primates kept all 5, essentially as they came. The same pentadactyl limb, Chapter 8, pulled out of a Devonian swamp, barely modified. They also kept the clavicle, the collarbone, which running mammals reduce or lose entirely, because a collarbone gets in the way of a leg that only swings forward and back. But a collarbone is a strut that holds the shoulder out from the chest, and it's what allows an arm to reach up, out, sideways, and around. And they kept a generalist's teeth, suited to eating more or less anything. It's tempting to call this primitive. It's the opposite. Not specializing is itself a specialization, a commitment to versatility, to keeping options open, to being adequate at everything, rather than superb at one thing. And it's precisely why the primate body could later be picked up and repurposed for tasks nothing in the canopy ever demanded. A horse cannot rebuild a hoof into a hand. We never sealed the door. And finally, fewer babies and a much longer childhood. Primates typically have 1 infant at a time, gestate it for a long while, nurse it for a long while, and keep it dependent for a long while after that. And they live a long time. This is the exact opposite of the mouse strategy. Many cheap offspring, thrown at the world, most of them dying. And look at where it comes from. Chapter 10 built the loop. Endothermy funds an expensive brain, and milk buys the developmental time to program it. Primates take that loop and lean on it hard. They spend the purchase lavishly. They bet everything on a small number of offspring, each one carried and fed and protected for years, each one learning the entire time. That bet is going to keep escalating for the rest of this book. The family and a raft. The first primates, or something very close to them, appear right after the KPG boundary, roughly 65 to 55 million years ago, in the emptied world of Chapter 10. By the Eocene, 56 to 34 million years ago, they are unambiguous and everywhere. And the world they radiated into was perfect for them. Hot, wet, and forested, a near-continuous canopy running from the tropics up into what is now the Arctic. There were crocodiles in Wyoming and palm trees in Alaska. It was a planet made of trees, and the primates went up into them and spread. The living primates fall into 2 great branches, and the split is old. Strepsirrhines, the lemurs, lorises, and galagos, kept much more of the ancestral mammal. They have a rhinarium, the wet, naked, dog-like nose pad, the sign of an animal that is still smelling the world seriously. Most are still nocturnal. And they have a tapetum lucidum, that mirrored layer behind the retina, that bounces light back through the photoreceptors for a second pass, doubling the sensitivity of the eye in darkness. It is the reason a cat's eyes flash green in headlights. It is a Chapter 10 legacy, a piece of night vision equipment inherited straight from the nocturnal mammals in the shadow of the dinosaurs, and the strepsirrhines never gave it up. The lemurs are their own story, stranded on Madagascar, cut off from everything. They radiated in isolation into an astonishing variety of forms with nobody to compete with. It's a rerun of the KPG radiation on one island in miniature. Haplorhines, the tarsiers, monkeys, and apes, including us, went the other way. They lost the wet nose. They dialed down the smell. They went diurnal out in the daylight and rebuilt the whole animal around vision. And the tarsier, a tiny, huge-eyed insect eating haplorhine from Southeast Asia, is a beautiful piece of evidence for exactly that history. Because tarsiers went back to the night. They are nocturnal. And they did not get the tapetum back. Instead, they grew eyes so enormous that a single eyeball is roughly the size of the tarsier's brain. Each eye is too large to rotate in its socket, so the tarsier had to evolve a neck that swivels almost like an owl's just to look around. That's a ridiculous solution. Growing an absurd eyeball is a far worse answer than simply re-evolving the mirror. And it tells you something with real force. The tarsier's ancestors couldn't get the mirror back because it was gone broken beyond repair. Deleted. Which means the haplorhine lineage spent long enough in the daylight, where a tapetum is useless and blurs the image, that the machinery rotted away permanently. Evolution cannot unloose things. When the tarsier needed to see in the dark again, it had to start over with what was left, and what was left was the eyeball. Within the haplorhines, the monkeys and apes, the anthropoids, split along a line drawn by an ocean. Platyrrhines, the New World monkeys of Central and South America capuchins, spider monkeys, howlers, marmosets. And some of them have something no Old World primate has ever had. A genuinely prehensile tail. Not a balance rod. A fifth limb, muscular, dexterous, strong enough to hold the animal's entire body weight, and equipped on its underside with a bare, ridged, sensitive patch of skin. That is, for all practical purposes, a fingerprint. A spider monkey can hang from its tail and use all four hands. Catarrhines, the Old World monkeys and apes of Africa and Asia. Baboons, macaques, colobus, and us. Old World monkeys have tails, but they can't grip with them. Apes have no external tail at all. And how did the monkeys get to South America? This is one of those facts that sounds like a joke until you check it. They came from Africa, and they almost certainly got there by floating. In the Eocene and Oligocene, the Atlantic was narrower than it is now, and there were islands. And when a great tropical river floods, it tears whole sections of riverbank loose, trees, soil, vines, and everything living in them, and washes them out to sea as enormous drifting mats of vegetation. These rafts are real. They've been observed. They can be substantial. Somewhere around 35 or 40 million years ago, a mat like that went out of an African river with a few small monkeys clinging to it and drifted west on the current and hit South America. Sounds preposterous. But notice, it only had to work once. In 40 million years, with rafts leaving the coast of Africa every time a river flooded, a single success is not a miracle. It's a statistical certainty waiting to happen. And the genetic evidence agrees. New and Old World monkeys are deeply, cleanly separated, in exactly the way a single ancient founding event predicts. Every monkey in the Americas is descended from a handful of castaways. Getting color back. Chapter 10 left you with a wound. In their long nocturnal exile, the mammals lost their color vision, throwing away receptors they couldn't use in the dark. Most mammals today are dichromates, two kinds of cone, seeing a world of blues and yellows, where a bird or a lizard sees in four. Primates got some of it back. Old World monkeys and apes, including you, are trichromatic, three cone types, blue, green, and red. And we know precisely how it happened. An ancestral catarrhine had a single opsin gene sitting on the X chromosome. And at some point, that gene was accidentally duplicated. A copying error, a stutter, the kind of mistake that happens constantly in genomes, and usually does nothing. Now there were two copies. And with two copies, one of them was free to change without breaking anything, because the other one was still doing the job. So they drifted apart. One copy's peak sensitivity slid toward green. The other slid toward red. And suddenly, on top of the ancestral blue receptor, there were three, and the world came back into color. And here is the loveliest part. The intermediate step is still alive. Most New World monkeys never had the duplication. They still have one opsin gene on the X chromosome, but that gene comes in several different versions in the population. Work out the consequence. A female has two X chromosomes. If she happens to inherit two different versions of the gene, one greenish, one reddish, then she has three cone types, and she is trichromatic. A male has one X chromosome, one gene, one version. He is always dichromatic. Always. Which means that in a troop of squirrel monkeys, foraging in the same tree, eating the same fruit, some of the females can see red, and not one of the males can. They are living in the same forest and looking at different worlds. That's not a curiosity. That is the before picture. It is what trichromacy looks like just before gene duplication comes along and locks it in for everybody. And its existence is powerful confirmation that the duplication story is right. But why? What was worth seeing? Ripe fruit. Under dichromatic vision, a red fruit against a green leaf is nearly invisible. Both collapse to similar drab tones. Under trichromacy, it blazes. It leaps out of the foliage like a lit bulb. And the plants are in on it. Many tropical fruits appear to have co-evolved with primate color vision, deliberately turning red or orange when their seeds are ready, advertising to the animals that will eat them and carry the seeds away. The fruit is a signal, and we are the intended audience, and the whole arrangement is a bargain. You can see me now, and I want you to. Young leaves. Same logic. Fresh leaf growth is often reddish, tender, and rich in protein. Old leaves are tough and loaded with toxins. Being able to tell them apart at a distance is worth a great deal to a leaf eater. And there's a third possibility, which will matter enormously later. Trichromatic vision is exquisitely sensitive to something else. The color of skin, blushing, flushing, paling, the subtle rush of blood to a face, the particular pallor of illness, or the flush of anger, or the reddening of a sexual signal. All of that is written in shades of red against a background of skin, and it is precisely the range in which trichromacy outperforms dichromacy. And here's the striking correlation. The primates with the best color vision are, disproportionately, the primates with bare faces. Whether trichromacy evolved to read faces or simply found faces once it existed, we can't yet say, but it points at something this book will return to with force. For a social primate, the most important thing in the environment to see clearly is another primate. And one final note, which you may be living with. Red-green color blindness, far more common in men than women, because the relevant genes sit on the X chromosome, and men have only one. That is not a random defect. It is a direct scar of the duplication itself. Two genes, sitting side by side on the same chromosome, nearly identical in sequence, and therefore prone to getting muddled and recombined incorrectly during the making of sperm and eggs. The very event that gave us color vision is the reason some of us don't quite have it. The hand, come back to your hand, because everything in this book is converging on it. Start with what it inherited. The pentadactyl limb, 1 bone, 2 bones, many bones, 5 digits, pulled out of a Devonian swamp in Chapter 8 and carried, essentially unchanged, for 370 million years. Now the primate additions. Opposability. The thumb's base joint is shaped like a saddle, which lets it rotate as well as swing. So the pad of the thumb can be brought around to face the pads of the fingers, not next to them, facing them. That rotation is the whole game. Independent fingers, separate tendons, and, crucially, separate representation in the motor cortex of the brain, so that each digit can be commanded on its own rather than as part of a fist. Sensitive pads with nails behind them, as above, and an obscene amount of brain devoted to all of it. There's a famous image in neuroscience called the cortical homunculus, a drawing of a human body, with each part scaled to how much brain tissue is devoted to it. The result is a monstrosity, a tiny torso, spindly legs, and then colossal hands and an enormous mouth and tongue, dwarfing everything else. That's not a metaphor. That's the map. A grotesque fraction of your brain exists to run your fingers, and there are 2 ways to hold something. The power grip. The object is clamped between your curled fingers and the palm, with the thumb wrapped around to lock it. This is how you hold a branch, or a hammer, or a club. The precision grip. The object is held between the pad of the thumb and the pads of the fingertips, with the palm doing nothing at all. This is how you hold a needle, or a berry, or a small sharp stone flake. Most primates have both, to some degree. Chimpanzees have a decent power grip, and a rather poor precision grip. Their thumbs are short and their fingers long, which is super for hanging from branches, and mediocre for pinching things. And in humans, the precision grip is developed to a degree that has no parallel anywhere in the animal kingdom. A long thumb, a strong thumb, muscles at its base that no other ape has, fingertips it can meet pad to pad, firmly, with force and with millimeter accuracy. You can hold a grain of rice. You can turn a key. You can strike a flake off a piece of flint at exactly the angle you intended. Chapter 12 will show you what happened when that grip met a stone. But hold the essential fact clearly. The human hand is not a human invention. It is an arboreal foraging tool, evolved to encircle a swaying branch and pluck small food from a twig. It was built for the canopy, by an animal with no plans, for a job that has nothing to do with anything we now use it for. And then it was freed from the branch, and it turned out to be the most versatile object in the history of the planet. This is exaptation on the scale of the tetrapod limb itself. It is the same story as the lung, the fin, the jaw, and the ear bone, told once more, at the very end of the line. Other minds, primates are social, and not casually so. Most primates live in stable, structured groups, and these are not herds. A herd is an anonymous mass. A primate troop is a society, and its members are individuals who know each other. They recognize one another as specific persons. They remember. They form friendships that last years. They rank each other in hierarchies. They know who their relatives are, and treat them differently. They build alliances, coalitions of 2 or 3 individuals who back each other in fights, and who can therefore beat a stronger animal that has no friends. They reconcile after conflicts, seeking each other out afterward to make peace. They repay favors, and they deceive. A low-ranking chimpanzee that finds food will sometimes sit quietly, saying nothing, waiting until the others move away, and running through all of it, as the central currency of the whole system. Grooming. Hours of it, every day. Ostensibly it's hygiene, picking out parasites and dirt. Functionally, it's almost entirely social. It's how bonds are made, maintained, repaired, and paid for. Grooming is how a primate says I am with you, and it is how it collects on the debt later. Which raises the question this chapter has been circling. Brains are, as chapter 10 established, catastrophically expensive. Yours burns 1/5 of your energy while doing nothing. So why do primates have such big ones? The social brain hypothesis, argued most prominently by Robin Dunbar, gives an answer that many people find counterintuitive and, once they've thought about it, obvious. It wasn't the food, it wasn't the trees, it was each other. Think about what it actually takes to succeed in a primate group. You must track dozens of individuals. You must remember your entire history with each one, and, far harder, you must track their histories with each other. Who is allied with whom? Who is currently feuding? Who owes whom? Who was watching when you did that thing you shouldn't have done? You must be able to model what another animal is likely to do, which means modeling what it knows, and what it wants. And you must do all of this in an environment where every other individual is doing the same thing, about you. That last clause is the engine, because it means there is no fixed problem to solve. The problem is other minds, and other minds are getting cleverer too. Every increment of social intelligence, every new capacity to deceive, or to detect deception, or to remember a slight, or to build a coalition, raises the bar for everyone. And the bar keeps rising, forever. Because your competitors are the same species as you and are under exactly the same pressure. Recognize the shape of it. Chapter 5's Red Queen, the arms race with no equilibrium, where you must run as fast as you can just to stay in the same place. Except this time it isn't predator versus prey. This time the arms race is running inside the species, between individuals, and the weapon is intelligence. It's sometimes called Machiavellian intelligence, and there is a bleak beauty to it. The most plausible engine of primate brain expansion was not the mastery of nature, it was the management of each other. Dunbar's central evidence is a correlation across primate species. The size of the neocortex tracks the typical size of the social group. Bigger societies, bigger brains. Run the line out to human neocortex size, and you get a number, around 150, which has become famous as Dunbar's number, the supposed ceiling on how many genuine, stable social relationships one person can maintain. I want to be straight with you. That specific number is genuinely disputed, and so is the strength of the correlation behind it. Plenty of researchers think the whole thing is shakier than its popularity suggests, but the broader claim, that social complexity was a major driver of primate brain expansion, is far more widely accepted than the particular figure. And out of this comes the capacity that everything else depends on. Theory of mind, understanding that other individuals have minds of their own, that they hold beliefs, harbor intentions, know things you don't, and can be wrong about the world in ways you can see and they cannot. Great apes have at least part of this. In experiments, a chimpanzee will reliably go for food that a dominant rival cannot see, and avoid food the rival can see, which means it is tracking, in its head, not what is the case, but what another animal believes is the case. That is a mind modeling a mind. Humans have it in a form so much richer, that it may be a difference in kind rather than degree. And I want you to notice what it makes possible, because the list is not small. You cannot teach unless you understand that another person doesn't know something. You cannot lie unless you understand that they can be made to believe something false. You cannot cooperate with a stranger unless you can model what they want. And you cannot speak, not really, unless you can grasp that the person listening has a mind you are trying to put something into. Teaching, deception, cooperation, language, all of it stands on one foundation. And the foundation was poured by apes trying to outmaneuver each other in a forest. The apes hang down. Around 25 to 20 million years ago, in the Miocene, the Catarrhine line split. Down one branch, the old world monkeys. Down the other, the apes. And here's a fact that will reorder your mental picture of the world. The Miocene was the age of apes. The fossil record documents a rich, sprawling radiation of ape genera across Africa, Europe, and Asia, many kinds, many sizes, all over the old world. The apes were doing well. They aren't anymore. The living apes, gibbons, orangutans, gorillas, chimps, bonobos, and us are a remnant. Nearly all of them are endangered. It is the monkeys who are the successful catarrhines of the present day, and it is the monkeys who are thriving. We are the last few branches of a tree that has been cut back almost to the trunk. And what made an ape? One changed from which nearly everything else follows. Monkeys run along the tops of branches, 4 legs on top, like a cat on a fence. It works beautifully, and it's what a monkey's whole body is built for. Apes hang underneath them. Suspension, hanging by the arms, swinging beneath the branch, moving hand over hand brachiation. And when you flip an animal from standing on top to hanging below, you have to rebuild it from the ribs outward. The chest changes shape. A monkey's ribcage is narrow and deep, squeezed side to side, like a dog's. An ape's is broad and shallow, wide across, flattened front to back. Like yours. Put your hands on your ribs and feel it. You are wider than you are deep. The shoulder blade moves. In a monkey, and a dog, and a horse, the scapula sits on the side of the rib cage, so the arm swings forward and back like a leg. In an ape, the scapula has migrated onto the back, and the shoulder socket has rotated to face outward. And this is the one you can test right now. Raise your arm straight over your head. Now rotate it in a full circle. Do it. Feel how freely it goes. A monkey cannot do that. A dog cannot. A horse cannot. A cat cannot. That range of motion, full overhead rotation, the arm swinging in a complete cone, exists in you for exactly one reason. So that an ape could hang from a branch by one hand and rotate its entire body underneath it. That is what the joint is for. That is the problem it was built to solve, in a Miocene forest, 20 million years ago. And every overhead thing a human has ever done, every thrown spear, every pitched baseball, every stroke of a swimmer, every hand reaching for a high shelf, every hammer swung, every axe raised, is running on hardware built for hanging. The tail goes, and it makes perfect sense. A tail is a balancing organ for an animal running along the top of a branch, where the center of mass is above the support in the whole system is unstable and wants to topple. Hang underneath the branch, and your center of mass is below your grip, and you are stable automatically. Gravity is now doing the balancing for you. The tail has nothing to do. So it went. Recent work has traced the loss to a particular jumping genetic element that inserted itself into a gene called TBXT in the ape lineage, a small, random piece of genomic vandalism that deleted the ape tail. It's a new finding, and its full story is still being worked out. But it didn't go entirely. Reach behind you and press at the very base of your spine, below the small of your back. That knob of bone is your coccyx, 3 to 5 small vertebrae, fused into a stub. It is a tail. Your tail, shortened, fused, buried under the skin, and doing nothing. You had a longer one, once. A human embryo, at around 5 weeks, has a visible tail with a dozen or so vertebrae, projecting out past the legs. And then, over the following weeks, the cells in it undergo the program death of Chapter 4, apoptosis, and the tail is dismantled, absorbed, and reduced to the stub you are touching. Every one of us grows a tail, and then deletes it. Who's who among the living apes? The lesser apes, gibbons and siamangs, split off first, and they are the finest brachiators alive. A gibbon moving through a canopy at speed does not look like an animal climbing. It looks like an animal flying, releasing one branch, and sailing 10 meters through open air to catch the next. It is one of the most beautiful things in nature. The great apes, orangutans, splitting off around 15 to 13 million years ago. The only Asian great ape. Gorillas, around 9 to 8 million years ago. And then the chimpanzee and bonobo lineage, from which our own line separated roughly 6 or 7 million years ago. That is Chapter 12. Everything after this point is very close to home. What apes already have. The great apes are not humans with the volume turned down, but they are also not something categorically other, and the continuity between their minds and ours is the single most important fact in this chapter. They make tools. Wild chimpanzees strip the leaves from a twig, insert it into a termite mound, wait, withdraw it covered in soldier termites, and eat them off like a skewer. They select stones as hammers, select other stones as anvils, carry them to nut trees, and crack nuts, and it takes a young chimp years of watching and failing to get good at it. They chew leaves into a wad and use it as a sponge to soak up water from a hollow they can't reach with their lips. In Senegal, chimpanzees have been observed breaking off branches, stripping them, sharpening the ends with their teeth, and jabbing them into hollow trunks to hunt bush babies sleeping inside. Tool use is not a human invention. It's an ape thing. We just went further with it than anyone expected. They have culture. This is the bigger finding, and it deserves to land. Different chimpanzee populations, in different parts of Africa, do things differently. And the differences aren't genetic, and they aren't explained by what's available in the local environment. One community cracks nuts with stone hammers. A neighboring community, with the same nuts and the same stones, does not. Grooming postures differ between groups. Termite fishing techniques differ. Ways of getting a drink differ. And the young learn these things by watching the adults, the specific adults, in their specific group, doing it their specific way. That is culture in the strict technical sense. Behavior transmitted socially rather than genetically, differing between populations, and persisting across generations. The great engine of Chapter 13, the thing that makes humans so bizarre, the accumulation of knowledge across generations so that each one starts where the last left off, did not come out of nowhere. It has ape roots. We didn't invent culture. We inherited it and then it ran away with us. They know themselves. Put a mark on an animal's forehead while it's sedated. Then show it a mirror. Almost every animal on Earth treats the reflection as another animal, greeting it, threatening it, ignoring it, or looking behind the glass. But a chimpanzee looks in the mirror, sees the mark, and reaches up and touches its own forehead. Not the mirror itself. It understands that the thing in the glass is it. Chimps, bonobos, and orangutans pass this test. Gorillas are equivocal, though gorillas find direct eye contact threatening, which may be muddying the result. There is somebody in there, and it knows that it is somebody. And they communicate, but they do not speak. Wild apes have rich systems of calls, gestures, and facial expressions. And captive apes have been taught hundreds of signs or symbols and combine them meaningfully. But, and this must be said carefully, because the field has a long and bruising history of overclaiming, no ape has ever demonstrated the open-ended, recursive grammar of human language. Apes can name, they can request, they can string signs together. What they have never shown is the ability to build hierarchical, infinitely extendable structure, to embed a clause inside a clause inside a clause, and to generate an unlimited number of new sentences that no one has ever produced before, and be understood. The chimp that the keeper who fed the monkeys yesterday scolded is angry. You just parsed that. It's ugly, but you parsed it, and you had never seen it before, because I made it up. Whether that gap is a difference of degree, or a difference of kind is one of the great live arguments in cognitive science, and I am not going to pretend it's settled. Chapter 13 will take it up. Everything, and no reason to use it. Follow what the Canopy did. It took a small nocturnal insect eater, and sent it out onto the thin ends of the branches, into a place where you must grip what sways, aim at what moves, and feel what you cannot see. And so it built a hand that encircles and senses. It rotated the eyes to the front and gave them depth, and paid for it by letting the nose die. It duplicated a gene and got color back, so that ripe fruit would burn against green leaves. It shrank the litter to one, and stretched the childhood out for years. It threw the animals into groups, where they began an arms race against each other's minds, that inflated the brain past all reason. And then it flipped one lineage upside down, so that it hung beneath the branches instead of running on top of them, and rebuilt the chest, moved the shoulder blade onto the back, opened up the arm to rotate over the head, and deleted the tail. Every single one of those things evolved for reasons entirely internal to life in a tree. Not one of them evolved for what came next. There was no plan. There never is. And yet, by around 7 million years ago, in Africa, there was an ape that possessed a hand that could pinch with precision, eyes that could guide it to within a millimeter, a shoulder that could rotate fully overhead and hurl, a brain already swollen by generations of social competition, already using tools, already teaching its children, already passing traditions across generations, already recognizing itself in still water, already modeling what other minds knew and wanted, and a childhood long enough to learn every bit of it. The equipment was finished. Every part of the machine that would one day chip a hand axe, kindle a fire, paint a cave wall, and write the sentence was already assembled, in the trees, in an animal that used it to pick fruit, and groom its friends and avoid falling. There was only one thing missing, a reason to come down, stand up, and let go of the branch.